from the month of December. The first topic is status of fiscal deficit in states. The RBI has released the 7th edition of its statistical publication titled Handbook of Statistics of Indian States 2021-22. Now the key highlights from the RBI data are states fiscal deficit. Now the fiscal deficit increased from 5.2 trillion rupees in 2019-21 to 9.3 trillion in 2020-21. Now the deficit fell to INR 8.1 trillion but stood much higher than the pre-pandemic levels of 5.2 trillion. Now moving on, in financial year 2020-21, the highest fiscal deficit was recorded in Tamil Nadu, followed by Maharashtra and UP. Now states tax revenue, Karnataka, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra witnessed a marginal decline in their tax revenue receipts in financial year 2020-21. The highest fall in own tax revenue was seen in Kerala. Now, centre's fiscal deficit, in case of union government, the fiscal deficit jumped from 4.6% in FY 2019-20 to 9.3% of the GDP in financial year 2020-21. Now, issues raised by states in pre-budget meeting is that the finance ministers of states and union territories held pre-budget meeting with the union finance minister. Now, the issues raised by the states are regarding to cess and surcharges. Now, cess and surcharges as a percentage of gross tax revenue has increased from 10.4% in FY 2011-12 to 26.7% in financial year 2021-22. Now, the cess and surcharges do not form a part of the divisible pool of taxes, and this has deprived the states of their legitimate share of the revenue collected by the union government. Now, the states have urged the union government to make cess and surcharge part of the divisible pool of central taxes. Now, centrally sponsored schemes, the state's financial autonomy is getting compromised as their contribution to centrally sponsored schemes has increased. Now, the states have demanded that the center and state funding ratio should be 90:10 rather than 60:10 in CSS. The higher borrowing limits to states, given the financial difficulties faced by the states, their borrowing limits for the states should be at least 4% of the gross state domestic product for another year. The union government has set the borrowing limit at 4% of the GSDP for FY 22-23, with another 50 basis points window if state carries out power sector reforms. Now, states like Tamil Nadu also raised concerns about pending dues from the 5-year GST compensation window for the states that expired on June 30th, 2022. States have also demanded that the GST revenue share of the state should be increased to 60% from the present 50%, as the states are going through severe financial problems. Now, old pension schemes. Chhattisgarh Chief Minister asked the centre to resolve the issue of refunds of the corpus given to the National Pension Scheme, as the state has restored the old pension scheme. Now, third topic is regarding friendshoring. Now, the US Treasury Secretary has pushed for friendshoring to diversify trade away from countries facing geopolitical risks. Now, friendshoring is also called ally shoring. It is a strategy where a country sources raw materials, components, manufactured goods from countries that share its values. The dependence on the country is considered a threat to the stability of supply chain is gradually reduced. Now, friendshoring is getting manifested in the way Western companies are diversifying supply chains and investing beyond China. Example, Apple has announced to shift its iPhone manufacturing facilities from China to India. Implications of friendshoring are that friendshoring may push world towards a more isolated place for trade and reverse the gains of globalization. It is part of deglobalization process. Now, global supply chains have allowed firms to manufacture products at the cheapest price, hence it enhances affordability. Friendshoring can change the dynamics of the global supply chain, restricting manufacturers and ultimately increasing the cost for consumers. Now, loan write-offs by the banks. According to RBI, banks have written off more than 10 lakh crore rupees of loan in over the last 5 years. They have been able to recover 13% of the amount. Now, write-off of a loan essentially means it will no longer be counted as an asset. By writing off loans, a bank can reduce the level of non-performing assets on its book. The loan write-offs does not take away the bank's right of recovery from the borrower through legal means. Reason for write-offs is that the bank writes off a loan after the borrower has defaulted on the loan repayment and there is very low chances of recovery. The lender then moves the defaulted loan or NPA out of the asset sides and reports the amount as a loss. After the write-off, banks are supposed to continue their effort to recover the loan using various options. Now, the tax liability will also come down as the written-off amount is reduced from profit as it is treated as a loss. Excuse me. Now, the amount written off, private banks wrote off loans worth rupees 2.7 lakh crores in the last 5 years in their effort to bring down the NPAs. This works out to be 27.3% of the total write offs of the last 5 years. Now, the public sector's banks have written off 7.34 lakh crore rupees, accounting for 72.7% of the total write offs. Now, Energy Conservation Amendment Bill 2022, the Rajya Sabha has passed the Energy Conservation Bill of 2022. The bill has been passed by the Lok Sabha in August 2022. The bill proposes to amend Electricity Conservation Act of 2001, which was last amended in 2010, and to introduce changes such as incentivizing the use of clean energy by issuing carbon saving certificates. Now, the key provisions of the bill are obligation to use non-fossil source of energy. The Act empowers union government to specify energy consumption standards. The bill adds that the government may require the designated consumers to meet a minimum share of energy consumption from non-fossil sources. Now let's look at designated consumers under Section 14E of the Energy Conservation Act of 2001. The central government can notify certain designated consumers. Industrial unit from 9 energy-intensive sectors, which is aluminium, cement, chloroalkali, fertilizer, iron and steel, paper and pulp, railways, thermal power, and textile have been notified as designated consumers. Now, carbon trading. The bill empowers the union government to specify a carbon credit trading scheme. Carbon credit implies a tradable permit to produce a specified amount of carbon emissions. Now, standards for vehicle and vessels under this act, the energy consumption standards may be specified for equipments and appliances which consume, generate, transmit, or supply energy. The bill expands the scope to include vehicles as defined under the Motor Vehicle Act of 1988 and vessels, including ships and boats. The applicability to residential buildings under the Act, the Energy Conservation Code applies to commercial buildings. Under the bill, the new Energy Conservation and Sustainable Building Code will also apply to office and residential buildings meeting the certain criteria. Now, composition of the Governing Council of B is that the bill strengthens institutions such as B by amending the composition of the Governing Council of B. Now let's move on to high subsidy bill. The Union government has sought the approval of Parliament for fresh expenditure of rupees 2.14 lakh crore towards subsidies over and above the 3.17 lakh crore budgeted for 22-23. Now the 5.32 lakh crore rupees spending on subsidy in 22-23 would be the second highest after the 7 lakh crore spent in 2021. Now, the 2021 spike in subsidy was an account of one-time provision to clear all dues of the FCI and fertilizer companies. Now, the overshooting of subsidies in 22-23 has been due to COVID-19 and Russia-Ukraine war. The pandemic has resulted in record offtakes of rice and wheat through PDS under various welfare schemes like Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. Now, in fertilizer and petroleum, the higher subsidy outgo has been due to surge in global prices from September-October 2021 and more so after the Russian invasion of Ukraine.